They called him a hero, awarded him medals, gave speeches in his honor, even built a statue with his face etched in bronze. To the world, Sergeant John Mercer was a man of courage, a soldier who risked everything for his country. But behind the uniform and headlines was a haunted man, carrying memories that wouldn't let him sleep. This isn't a story about victory. It's a story about the silence that follows gunfire, the truth that medals can't erase, and the war that never ends once you come home. The applause was deafening. John Mercer stood stiffly on the stage, the sun glaring off the rows of polished medals on his chest. His uniform was freshly pressed, his boots shined to perfection, and the Medal of Valor now hung heavy around his neck. The general beside him smiled proudly, patting him on the back as the crowd roared, because he had to. Cameras flashed, hands clapped, people chanted his name like he was some kind of god. John Mercer, American hero, but all he could hear was the screaming. The screaming of a boy no older than 14, caught in the crossfire. The last thing the boy saw was John's face, his rifle still hot from the trigger. He hadn't meant to kill him, he had hesitated, but the boy had something in his hand. Could have been a grenade. The general leaned in. "Keep smiling, son. History's watching history." That was a joke. The real story wasn't the one printed in newspapers or broadcast on TV. The real story was buried somewhere in the desert, along with bodies no one cared to count. When the ceremony was over, he returned to his car and sat in silence for a long while. He didn't take off the medal. He just stared at it, ran his fingers over the gold. It was beautiful, heavy, cold. He finally drove home, a small house on the edge of town, the kind of quiet place people imagined heroes lived. Flags on porches, neighbors who smiled too hard, kids who played war in the front yard, yelling, "Bang, bang, you're dead." Without knowing what that actually meant, he parked, got out, and walked to his porch. The wind stirred the flag hanging by the door. Red, white, blue, blood, smoke, silence inside. His wife Lisa greeted him with a warm hug. She looked proud, eyes shining, like she still believed in the myth of what he was. "I saw you on TV. Looked so strong up there." He tried to smile. "Thanks, you okay?" Yeah, he lied. Later that night, long after Lisa had gone to bed, he sat alone in the dark living room with a bottle of whiskey and the medal. He kept turning it over in his hand, wondering if the boy's face would ever go away. The dreams always came. Tonight was no different. He was back in that narrow alley, the sun blinding, sweat dripping down his neck, heart pounding in his ears. His squad had just cleared a building when they heard movement. Fast footsteps. A shadow darted out. He'd yelled, "Stop," but the figure kept coming. Hands raised, something clutched tight. He fired. The body hit the ground with a sickening thud. It was a boy, just a boy. He woke up gasping, shirt soaked. Not for that, not for any of it. But they needed a hero, and he was the one still breathing. John stopped sleeping, not fully, not really. He'd close his eyes. But rest never came. Just flashes faces, that boy's eyes, wide with fear and confusion. The smell of gunpowder, the blood dot. In the mornings, Lisa would ask, "Bad dreams again?" He'd nod or lie, just couldn't get comfortable. She tried to help, made him tea, suggested therapy, even brought home a flyer from the local vet support group. He threw it away when she wasn't looking. It wasn't just the nightmares, it was everything. The way people looked at him like he was some kind of saint. The way kids saluted him at the grocery store. The way strangers thanked him for his service with glossy eyes and trembling voices. What would they say if they knew? If they saw what he saw? The town had even started fundraising to build a statue of him at the park. A statue for killing people. One day, he walked by the local high school, saw a group of seniors putting up flags for Memorial Day. One of the kids recognized him, Mr. Mercer. "Sir, can we get a picture with you?" He hesitated, then nodded. They huddled. Around him, smiling wide, he stood stiffly in the center, barely managing a half-dash smile. As the camera clicked, one of the boys said, "Wish I could have done what you did. Must feel amazing." John flinched. "No," he said quietly. "It doesn't." The boy blinked. "Huh," John forced a smile again. "Be careful what you wish for." At home that night, he pulled out an old shoebox from the top of the closet. It held his journals from deployment. Torn pages, smudged ink, Sand still stuck. In the corners, didn't feel like I thought it would. No adrenaline, no thrill. He flipped a few pages. Day 27. We raided a house. Thought it was a weapons cache. Turned out to be a family. We didn't shoot, but the kids cried like we had. I can't look at them. I see my sister's face. He closed the journal. That was enough. The past didn't sleep. It didn't forget. Later that week, Lisa found him sitting in the garage, staring at the metal again. "You're not okay," she said softly. He didn't answer. "I want you to talk to someone. Anyone." "Why?" he finally said. "So they can pat me on the back too. Tell me I did the right thing." Lisa knelt beside him. "You did what you had to." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "That's the problem. I keep asking what if I didn't." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "I'm tired, Lisa. I'm tired of being a hero." Neither did he. That night he took the medal and drove to the edge of town where the river curved behind the woods. It was quiet there, peaceful. He held the medal over the water, hand trembling. Let go, he thought. Just let it fall. But he Dean single quotes T'd instead. He slid it into his pocket and sat by the river until sunrise, wondering what forgiveness might look like hand. Whether he even deserved it. The days blurred together after that. John began drifting through life like a ghost. He still walked the streets of the town, still nodded politely when someone thanked him for his service, but the words bounced off him like empty bullets. He felt more dead now than he ever did on the battlefield. One afternoon, he wandered into the Veterans Center downtown. Not because he wanted to, but because his feet had nowhere else to go. The place smelled like coffee and old paper, a quiet room. A few old guys sat around a table playing cards and talking about football. Nobody noticed him at first, and for a moment, he thought about turning around. But then, a man stood up from the corner. Short, wiry, maybe in his late 60s. His voice was raspy. "You look like hell, son." John gave a tired smile. "Thanks. Come to talk. Or just sit and bleed." John stared at him. "I don't even know anymore." The man pointed at a seat. "Then sit." His name was Walter Vietnam. 2 tours, 3 Purple Hearts, 1 divorce. He told John everything in a single breath, like it didn't matter anymore. John didn't talk much that day, but he listened. And Walter talked. About the men who never came home. About the nightmares that didn't fade. About how medals are handed out for surviving, not for being right. "You know what they gave me when I came back?" Walter said, holding up a faded photograph of a young man in uniform. "They gave me a handshake and told me to move on." As if that was something you could do. John looked at the medal in his pocket. "What do you do when the thing that saved your life is the same thing that ruined it?" Walter leaned back in his chair. "You live. Badly, maybe slowly. But you live because the ones who didn't get that chance, they'd want you to." John came back the next day, in a new journal, not just about war, but about regret, about guilt, about trying to be human again. One evening, after a session, Walter handed him a card. "I know a guy, therapist, ex-military, doesn't ask stupid questions. You should call him." John looked at the card, then pocketed it. "I'll think about it." Walter chuckled. "That's vet speak for I won't." John smiled, for real this time. Maybe, or maybe not. At home, Lisa noticed the difference. He didn't drink as much. He started sitting with her on the porch again, even if he didn't say much. Sometimes, silence was enough. One night, she asked him, "Do you think you'll ever forgive yourself?" He didn't answer right away, just looked up at the stars. "I don't know, but maybe I'll figure out how to live with it." The town eventually built that statue. It was a bronze figure of him in uniform, saluting, eyes staring off into the distance. Everyone called it inspiring. John hated it, but he visited it anyway. Not because he liked it, but because sometimes he needed to stand there and remind himself that he was still here, that the past hadn't claimed him, not yet. As he looked up, at his own face cast in metal, he whispered, "You're not a hero, but you're not done yet." Months passed. John kept going to the Veterans Center. He kept writing. Some days were good, almost normal. Others were hard, heavy, like walking with weights on his chest. But he was showing up, and that had to count for something. He finally called the number on Walter's card. The therapist, Dr. Raynell, was quiet, calm. He didn't push. He didn't hand out cliches or throw around words like brave or patriot. He just listened. John told him everything. The alley, the boy, the silence that came afterward, the medal, the guilt that never left. Raynell nodded slowly. It wasn't your fault. John shook his head. But I pulled the trigger. You followed orders. You reacted. You did what you were trained to do. And that makes it okay. John snapped. No, Raynell said softly. It just makes it real. They didn't talk about forgiveness much. Instead, they talked about choices, about damage, about living with the pieces of yourself that don't fit anymore. You don't need to be okay, Raynell told him. You just need to keep going. John held on to that. He even started talking at the center. Not much, but enough. One evening, a young vet burly 23 broke down during a group session, said he saw a kid get blown up by a roadside bomb, and all he could think was how normal it looked, like it wasn't shocking anymore. John didn't say a word at first, then he stood up, walked over, and sat beside him. I shot a kid, he said flatly. Didn't know if he had a bomb or just a water bottle. I didn't wait to find out. Live with that every damn day. The room went quiet. The kid looked at him, tears falling. How do you live with it? John exhaled. One breath at a time, one truth at a time. Start there. He didn't realize it then, but that was the first time he spoke without shame tightening around his throat. At home, Lisa watched him come back to life in pieces. He wasn't whole, but he was more than he'd been. She found his new journal one day, left open on the table. The last line read, I'm not a hero. I'm a man who did what he thought was right. I live with what that cost. She didn't say anything, just kissed his forehead that night and held him a little longer. And then one afternoon, something changed. A letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photo, a young man, maybe 19, standing in front of a market in the Middle East. Behind him, a small boy holding a toy truck. The boy was smiling. On the back of the photo were just 6 words. He lived. You didn't kill him. John's hands trembled. It was the boy, the one he thought he'd shot. The photo had to be recent, the handwriting rough. But it was real. For the first time in years, John cried without shame. Cried from relief, from the unbearable weight that suddenly felt. A little lighter, he sat on the floor, holding that photo, whispering he lived. And for the first time, something inside him, something cold and broken, began to thaw. John carried that photo everywhere after that. Not to show people, not to prove anything, just to remind himself that maybe, just maybe, there were second chances in the world even if they didn't come the way you expected. He never found out who sent the letter. He asked around, tried tracing the handwriting, but it led nowhere. Walter joked that it was a ghost trying to give him peace. John didn't laugh. Not because he didn't believe it, but because part of him wanted it to be true. Some wounds weren't meant to be explained. The statue in the park was unveiled officially in a ceremony full of music, flags, and speeches. The mayor talked about sacrifice. Lisa held his hand the whole time. John stood still while cameras flashed, kids waved paper, flags. Everyone cheered. He didn't say a word. But later that night, when the crowds had left and the park was empty, he returned out alone. He stood before the statue in the dark, lit only by the soft orange glow of a streetlight. For a long time, he just stared at his own face in bronze. Then he pulled the Medal of Valor from his pocket and hung it around the statue's neck. This doesn't belong to me, he whispered. Not really. He stepped back and nodded once. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a surrender. It was a choice to stop carrying a weight that was never his alone. The next morning, he went to the Veterans Center and handed Dr. Raynell the photo. Think I'm ready, he said. Raynell smiled. To forgive yourself? No, John said quietly. To stop punishing myself. That night, he sat with Lisa on the back porch, the sky turning red and purple as the sun dipped low. You know, he said slowly, I used to think I'd die before I ever felt peace. She looked at him, and now he nodded toward the horizon. Now, I think peace isn't something that finds you. You have to build it, one piece at a time. Lisa leaned her head on his shoulder. Then let's build it together. He smiled, not because he was okay, but because he was trying, and maybe that was enough. Thank you for watching A Medal for Valor, A Life of Regret. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to understand what real heroes go through, not just on the battlefield, but long after the war ends. This wasn't just fiction. For many veterans, this is real life. The silence, the guilt, the weight of survival. If you or someone you know is struggling, know that help exists. Healing is hard, but not impossible. Sometimes, the bravest thing a soldier can do is come home and ask for help. Drop a comment below. What part of John's journey hit you the hardest? Subscribe for more powerful storytelling that doesn't sugarcoat the truth. Like if you believe stories like this need to be told. Thank you for watching.